Yeah, no, the speak up, just speak up it's a cliche. It's like Nike's just do it. Just do it without preparation and a strategy is a failure. Speaking up or just telling someone to speak up is just not being aware or mindful of the fact that there's so many other dynamics to play. Maybe that's not something that you did in your family or in your culture. I had a lady I worked with one time and literally it was an age thing. Everybody was older than her on the team and that dynamic of seniority and respecting elders was coming into play of her sharing information at work.
Yeah. Hello, and welcome to Revolutionary Leadership, the bi-weekly podcast that shines a spotlight on the visionary leadership approaches Black women have cultivated for generations, yet are too often overlooked. I'm Dr. Kerry Mitchell Brown, a cultural architect, racial equity strategist, and scholar of organizational change. For more than 20 years, I have helped leaders, organizations, and communities reimagine what's possible when equity and authenticity guide the way. Each episode, we'll dive deep into conversations that illuminate how Black women integrate community care, radical self-prioritization, and collective capacity building into transformative leadership practices. Together, we'll expand what leadership can look like and what liberation through leadership truly means. Because this is where Black women's stories become tomorrow's blueprints. Welcome back to Revolutionary Leadership, where Black women's stories become tomorrow's blueprints. Black women have always been architects of revolutionary communication, developing ways to lead, influence, and create change in environments where our voices were never meant to carry power. Yet, in many professional spaces, Black women are still interrupted, misinterpreted, or required to over-explain in order to be heard. Today's episode reveals how strategic communication brilliance becomes a leadership advantage, not through assimilation, but through intention, clarity, and narrative control. We're joined by a leader whose work shows how Black women convert communication barriers into platforms for extraordinary influence and impact. This conversation explores how leaders master difficult conversations, build influential relationships, and create new dialogue frameworks that moves ideas and people forward. Today's guest is Monique Russell, a global communications expert, speaker, and founder of Clear Communication Solutions. For more than two decades, Monique has trained and coached leaders across Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, and international organizations, equipping them with the tools to communicate with clarity, confidence, and emotional intelligence across differences. She is also a sought-out keynote speaker on emotional intelligence and cross-cultural leadership, author of The Ultimate Speaker's Guide and Intentional Motherhood, host of the Bridge to You podcast, exploring leadership communication and self-awareness, a mentor to students and women entrepreneurs through global leadership initiatives. Rooted in her Caribbean and African heritage, Monique's work centers purposeful leadership, narrative transformation, and empowered visibility, helping leaders build trust, deepen connection, and lead with influence in complex environments. Monique and I have been getting to know each other over the last year as co-conspirators and friends, and I've witnessed firsthand how her communication frameworks transformed leaders who were consistently being underestimated and powerful voices who reshape entire conversations. As mothers and Black women leaders who coach executives, we both understand how traditional communication advice often fails in spaces not designed for our voices. Monique, before we dive in, what are you sipping on today? I got my hot turmeric tea here. I know you're a tea person too.
I am. I have blackberry citrus with zinc and some
Ah,
honey and lemon.
needed to keep the germs off. I'm overcoming a cold, so I'm still getting that hot tea in. Perfect. I love that. Okay, so let's jump into some rapid fire questions to get us warmed up. What's a moment when you realize communication, not credentials, determined influence?
Well, the clearest example for me is I do not have an ICF coaching credential, but
Mm.
I have been hired by ICF certified coaches to help them become more effective, more self-aware in their work. And nobody asked me about certification. They asked about the results.
Yeah, that's really exciting. That's a wonderful example. What's one communication habit Black women are often penalized for, even when it's effective?
I can't speak for all Black women, but a pattern that I see consistently is Black women are penalized for over functioning, taking on too much, absorbing the responsibility, stabilizing the environments. And it's effective for the organization, but it's very costly for the individual. So the work gets done, the system benefits, but the person doing the emotional and operational work is taxed.
Ah, so a cost that you don't get reimbursed for. You can't put that on an expense report, right?
Nope.
Ah, what's the difference between being articulate and being strategically heard?
So articulate means you sound good. It's digestible, it's palatable, you sound really smart and intelligent. And being strategically heard depends on your goal, but the outcome is behavioral change. It's basically, are you shifting somebody's behavior? Are you having them reconsider their decision or shift their perspective? So, one, you sound really nice, but nothing's moving. And the other, you are being heard, but you're also influencing a shift in action or thought.
Ooh, thank you for that distinction. Powerful. We'll dig into that a little bit later in this episode. Let me start with something personal that completely changed how I think about narrative control. I was doing an assessment, working with a Fortune 100 board, showing their diversity initiatives were failing. Before I can get to recommendations, someone interrupted. Imagine that. And they said something like, "So you're saying our efforts have been wasted?" That wasn't really what I said, but defensiveness was like building and building in me fast. I realized my error. I presented the problem without establishing the vision first. This was earlier in my consultancy career. I paused, I reframed, you laid important groundwork. Now that we have an opportunity to transform it into sustainable change, some data, completely different narrative, the energy shifted. And so we were able to continue on as I had planned or hoped. So, Monique, how do you help clients catch themselves before they lose control of the narrative? Because I was slippery and it was close.
Well, listen, good comeback, okay? Because that's part of the process, I feel. You did what you did, and you did a great job at catching and reframing. And we're human beings. Let me just start off with that. Like, we're human beings.
So easy to forget, right? Especially when
Yeah.
you're presenting and then it's like planning and
The perfection thing, we got to just throw that out the window. So, one of my graduate degrees in public relations, and I have a degree in broadcast journalism. So, I know how important it is to tell the story and tell the story in a way that people could digest.
yeah.
But when you think about laying that foundation in your example, you were giving them some tough news that they needed to digest. But in order for them to receive it, we needed to put that nice work of what they already did well
Mhm.
up front. You heard the framework with the sandwich feedback, right?
Yeah.
And even though it's a framework and sometimes people use it really cheesily,
Yeah.
um, it works. Nobody wants to hear something that they need to improve on or do better at or that they're failing until that trust and that influence has been established. When I help clients, I help them to understand how information is translated and how the narrative needs to be shaped before they enter the room because people's bias outside of the context of the content that you're going to deliver, there's human bias too. So
Mhm.
even though your content might be completely wonderful, but you also have to address for the bias that's going to be in the room, whether your information is going to be received or met with resistance. And I'll give you an example. I remember I was doing a keynote speech for a Nigerian audience, and the cultural context is one that I understand. So, in that climate, credentials are extremely important. You gave me a rapid
Absolutely.
fire
Right,
question.
right.
So there's context. And so I knew that before I even spoke, I needed to make sure that the room could receive what I was going to say. So I extended my bio. I made sure it was like almost 2 pages so
Ah,
that by the time they have heard all the things and all the names that they need to hear, my message would be much better received. And that's an example of understanding the context and shaping the narrative.
I love that. Why does misinterpretation happen so consistently for Black women leaders?
Okay, 2 things. Communication, I think people tend to have this expectation that it's supposed to just be smooth. So I need to bust that myth. That's number 1.
Busted, busted.
Bust the myth. Now, misinterpretation happens because communication is working. You have to think about it like that.
I'm sorry, say that again? Misinterpretation happens because communication is working.
Yes.
Ha!
Yes. And
Okay.
let me explain.
Please.
We have so many different people that we're talking to at the same time, and every single one of us has different experiences. We have a different lens, we have a different view, we have a different interpretation of what one word mean. I can say the word calm to you, I can say the word emotional intelligence to you, I can say it to 10 different people and it can mean different things and it could trigger different experiences. So when communication is working, misinterpretation is a natural byproduct. When it's not working, it seems like everything is just smooth, but that means that nobody is actually speaking the truth. There's no genuine curiosity. Like, what do you
Mhm.
mean? Did you mean this? Did you mean that? What do you think about that? So that's the first myth I want to reestablish, that when misinterpretation is happening, it means that your communication is working because communication is work.
I
That's the first
love
one.
that. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. That's a aha moment for me. I didn't make that connection, so thank you, Monique.
You're welcome.
Dropping
That's what I'm
gems,
here for.
dropping
Listen, that's what I'm here
gems.
for.
So I wanna switch gears and let you lead on this one because I know strategic communication is your zone of genius. So when leaders come to you struggling to be heard, what's your approach?
Let me give you an example. So I worked with a client who she was a leader of a school system. And when she first came to me, she was just like, I'm tired. I don't even know what to do. Nobody's paying attention. Literally, if the team had a good day, she had a good day. If the team was quote unquote acting up, she had a stressful day. And she took that home with her every single day. That's not the way
The
you
way
want
to
to.
work or
No,
live.
you
What?
want to, but a lot of
Yeah.
people are doing it though.
A lot of
Dr.
people are
Kerry, a
doing it.
lot of people
They
are.
just assume, well, it's this it just comes with my job. Like it's a
Yes,
benefit, like it comes a part of the benefit package, right?
right. So I was like, no, lady, we not doing this. We not gonna have you taking this stress home to your family, to your
Right.
kids. So what we did first was we did assessments to find out. I think that's the most basic thing first, like the basic things. We got to start with the basics. How do people normally communicate? How do people normally process information and make decisions? And once we kind of understood that and pulled in her values, and then we looked at the ways that she would specifically for each person on her team, how to engage with them. And then we worked on her own regulating process. So it was like a comprehensive approach for her to be heard with her team members. And then a few months in, one of her superintendents was like, this is the calmest your team has ever been. I'm not hearing complaints and things like that. So that approach for her started with let's find out the basics around how you normally communicate. What are your strengths? What are your challenges? How do people normally process information and make decisions? And then from there, it was a more tactical approach as opposed to this generic. So I always like to start with that because it gives us a baseline and then we get into the deeper work.
I I'm a pretty quiet, introverted, person in spaces and meetings, and when there's something I have to say, then I just say it, and if not, I'm just taking in information. And I've had some feedback once, it was like, "Well, you need to speak up more." And what you're describing is really being strategic about how you communicate, like understanding like what works, what doesn't work, where the strengths are, and what might need development. And it's not the generic, well, you just got to speak up more, or you just have to, you have to speak. It's not a speak up more, type of thing.
No, it's not. See, then you get into the situation where it's a matter of who gets the most airtime, and that does not lead to influence, although it can perceive, like people can be perceived. It's like, oh, you're just talking just to talk. We've all been in those meetings where the person
Everybody
who's
talking
talking,
ain't saying nothing.
it's like, please, could you mute? Like, why are you running out the time in this meeting? We're not even halfway through the agenda. Why?
Right,
Why?
right, right.
So, yeah, no, the speak up, just speak up it's a cliche. It's like Nike's just do it. Just do it without preparation and a strategy is a failure. Speaking up or just telling someone to speak up is just not being aware or mindful of the fact that there's so many other dynamics to play. Maybe that's not something that you did in your family or in your culture. I had a lady I worked with one time, and literally it was an age thing. Everybody was older than her on the team. And that dynamic of seniority and respecting elders was coming into play of her sharing information at work.
Yeah.
So it's not just an isolated approach. We take a holistic approach, and that's why the work that we do is so sustainable, because we're not just slapping a framework on the top and say, "Okay, just speak up. Speak
Yes,
up
yes.
3 times in this meeting."
I
No.
love that.
No.
I love that. I love that. I want to talk about the thing you talk about the most, emotional intelligence
Mhm.
in difficult conversations. So, like this elder who was saying, speak up or to do something, that could be a difficult conversation, especially when your livelihood is on the line. And depending on how the organization, depending on your own personal values and how you value elders in your life and in the workplace and levels and seniority and all of the things. So, emotional intelligence and difficult conversation. I had a nonprofit client that hired me for an organization transformation. Like 6 months in, the executive director called and said, we need to pause. The board is concerned about the discomfort that this is creating because change causes discomfort. Not the change, but the uncertainty about what's going to happen to me because everybody's tuned in to WWI. What's in it for me radio and just wondering like what's going to happen to me, right? I spent 2 days preparing, documenting patterns, mapping resistance narrative, practicing regulating my real frustrations, my very real frustrations. Then I said, let's talk about what is actually happening in this transformation work. What happens when we avoid it versus navigating it strategically? We didn't pause. We actually accelerated that tension between emotional regulation and authentic expression. How do you help someone prepare when the stakes are high and the emotions are real and we really need to have difficult conversations?
Mm, mm, mm. Woo! You said it. You said it. We prepare. There's no way around it. I think when we think about somebody who is working with FBI hostage negotiation, it's recognized that, oh, there's a level of preparation that has to go into this because the stakes are high, lives are on the line. But we don't really intuitively see the same level of preparation has to go into what is considered to be a difficult conversation where the emotions are high. People make their decisions with emotions first, and then they justify it with logic. And so we can present the facts all day long, but at the end of the day, it is the emotion that is going to drive the decision. So in preparation, we list out the emotions. We look at the emotions. We look at the feelings, and we want to make sure that we're coming to the table in a way where that person feels heard. What do they need to feel heard? What do they need to understand? Not that they need to agree with you,
Right.
but it's the feeling. Two things that you said, Dr. Carey. One is really on the narrative shaping and doing a lot of prep and legwork on that front end, and then having those check-ins, those feedback loops during the process. It's almost like you're baking the bread and you're putting the little thermometer in there, or a turkey with the temperature checked, and you're making
Right.
sure the temperature is, are we going to burn this thing up, or are we going to be undercooked? It's an iterative integrative process where we're constantly taking the temperature of the people that are involved. Because at any point in time, things can go left field. And they're not just bringing the issue at work in front of you, they're bringing their whole lives. And their whole lives can also be fanning the flame. So that approach is we're going to identify and acknowledge the emotion. We're going to sit in it. We're going to create feedback loops and constant temperature checks. And then we're going to make sure that we're always laying that foundation, relaying the foundation, even when it gets peeled up during the process.
Oh, that's so powerful. One of the things that I've been wrestling with in my work is that tension between emotional regulation and authentic expression. Women that I work with, my one on one clients, I've seen them be penalized for showing any emotion, but I've also seen us silence ourselves too much. How do you help your clients navigate that?
First, it has to be something that's genuine. So there are a lot of narratives. So we're going to choose which narrative works for you. In the work that I do, I also see there's the real implications, but then it's also how do you process or how do you interpret what you're faced with or what you're going to encounter.
Mm,
Let's say, for example, I'm trying to find a really good example here. So if you're going to run a marathon, you know that chances are at some point in that marathon, you might get injured or you may become faint or you become dehydrated. And so because you know what the process involves, you can prepare a little bit better, but it doesn't change the fact that when you get to that point where you're dehydrated, it's going to suck. It's going to feel horrible, horrible,
yes.
horrible.
Yes.
When we're looking at the authentic expressions, being genuine in a way that we know we want it to be sustainable and not just something that's performative, we're going to lay down a very realistic foundation and set expectations. I think that is critical in how the approach is moving forward. And then the next part of it is making sure that we get your story, the person's story that is genuine so that they can show up in a way that it feels like their true selves. Because when you don't feel like your true self, you're just putting on, this is what I need to do to be digestible or palatable or received. And we live in a very, very big world. I mean,
Yes.
we have agency and we have choice. And so we do have opportunity to choose how we're going to engage. We do have an opportunity to choose if we're going to stay where we are, if we're not being appreciated or respected or valued. We do have choices. So I think it's really about empowering people to tap into their genuine story. But when I work with individuals, a lot of people they don't know what their genuine story is. That's part of the problem. And when we get to that story, we can use it strategically.
They hadn't shared it publicly. Like, we know what it is, but we've had so much conditioning on what stays at home and what can be public.
Yep.
And those are really about how we build relationships and build relationships outside of our families, outside of our friends, and building relationships at work too with our full selves, not just fractions of who people want us to be or who we believe that people want us to be. Oh, good stuff, good stuff, good stuff. I want to introduce something that I've been working with some organizations and teams over the last couple of years around relationships and dialogue with some real examples. And so I was working with a leadership team before the holidays. So we started our work and the same patterns played out in every meeting. Senior voices dominated, junior members stayed quiet, and Black women's contributions were overlooked. Traditional advice says create inclusive culture or encourage everyone to speak up, but we didn't need better behavior in a broken structure. We needed a new structure. So I introduced this process so they can document their dialogue. And dialogue is key because it was like one person to say something and nobody would build on it. It's just one person would say something, and then the next person will wait till they have their opportunity to throw something else in, right? And it went on like that, meeting after meeting after. I was like, why are we here? Why are we meeting? Right? A really heavy meeting culture, and people didn't get stuff done. So I shared this document where people added ideas in real time with their names attached. And we discussed the ideas in the document order, not based on who was the loudest or who was seniority. And the entire power dynamic shifted. And so the people with really good ideas, with really great ideas, those were folks who were newer to the company, had a different lens, had different lived experiences than the majority of the people in the room. How does this connect to relationship building in your work? Because some might worry this feels too formal or transactional. How do you help leaders see that redesigning dialogue frameworks can deepen relationships, not to diminish them?
So first of all, congratulations, Dr. Kerry.
Ah,
Okay, like
ah,
you did the
ah.
work. Okay. You did the work. You helped them to see things differently with that approach and lead to better outcomes. We are meaning making individuals. And as much as we love flexibility, like flexibility is one of my core values, we also do need structure and we do need frameworks that help us keep everybody on the same page or lead to a common goal. When you try to give someone an idea and you're trying to get them to see your viewpoint or your side, trying to convince on emotion is sort of like an endless battle. But when you can point to the structure and you can point to some of that factual data, then it's much harder to argue if you say, hey, I'm trying to get my body mass index down 10%. You're like, "No, I feel good. My clothes don't feel this way." It's like, "Okay, we're not gonna be convincing you on your emotion. We're gonna just look at some numbers and that's gonna give us, it's a great way for us to get on the same page, for us to move forward in the right direction." So, and I think it makes the relationship healthier because we're not pulling in different directions. There is a part where, when we over formalize things, and I'll go right back to that medical example. You go into a doctor's office, and if the bedside manner is just really structural and procedural, then even though that person might be delivering the best outcome for you, it's like,
There's no
nah,
connection. There's
they
absolutely
don't care about
you can't trust it, right? It's just like, do you even know my name without looking at my chart?
hello, but that person might have been the best doctor for you. So it needs to be balanced, relational clarity and connection. It needs to be sort of integrated and you'll know. You have to keep the temperature check. You'll know when it's too much or when you need to tap more into the human side of the person. But I think that's a great approach using structure and using framework and dialogue processes, including the emotional intelligence piece and the human piece to get the work done.
I've found that the structure creates room for the human piece
Absolutely.
because it just becomes too transactional. And I've been in situations where I didn't was not clear on the conversation we were actually having. It's like, oh, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest mistakes leaders can make in building influential relationships is sitting so long in the confusion on what we're actually talking about and not pausing and having those structures gives people that don't have the most power, if you will, in the relationship to build something. And I mean, I've seen it play out time and time again, and it's gorgeous when you can just be in dialogue with someone and you can build on ideas and you can see something to actually flourish. It actually reduces that tax that you were talking about earlier and the cost. Sometimes we think about how much we get paid by an organization and we forget about the cost of actually being there and holding and doing the work, and having some structures or some systems, frameworks, or whatever you want to call them, in place to help alleviate that. I think it's pretty powerful. What do you think?
What? It's a lot. It is a lot. And in this day and age, we do not have energy, patience, time to be voluntarily loading our nervous system down with foolishness. We
Right.
don't. We don't.
Right.
And so so the structure, I mean, I love the structure. I think it just really gives people a place to point to, and we remove the, oh no, you spoke once and you didn't speak twice or you didn't contribute. I think it's so beautiful because now you have a better tool to make sure that more voices are heard. And when I think about the outcome that you had with your meeting, I just think back to, I think it was Truth About Meeting Culture study. And I think it was either over 90% of meetings do not have an agenda. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? No agenda, no structure, and we're supposed to get work done. So no, I agree with you.
This conversation reminds us that communication is not simply about being understood, it's about being influential, it's about being strategic. And Black women have long mastered the art of translating, bridging, reframing in spaces not designed for our voices. Monique shows us how to do this without shrinking, self editing, or carrying unnecessary emotional labor. I love you're just pointing out what those costs actually are so that we can think about if we can afford it or not.
Absolutely.
And when leaders communicate with clarity, emotional intelligence, and intention, they don't just speak, they shape environments, they shift power, and they create lasting impact. Do you have any final words for our listeners, Miss Monique Russell?
Absolutely. I will say right now we are in a age where artificial intelligence is on the top of everybody's conversations.
Ah,
And when we
ah.
think about that and communication, I want everybody to know that at the end of the day, it's still your story that's going to make you stand out in front of everybody else. The clear communication framework focuses on cross cultural communication competence, your leadership, your emotional intelligence, your active listening, and your refined presentation skills. And I think that if you want to really stand out and live the life that you dream and desire, where your work is appreciated and valued,
Yes.
you want to be intentional about owning your story and becoming very strategically visible so that it lights you up and it doesn't make you feel exhausted.
That is so exciting. What's going on with you? Where can people find you? Where can people connect with you? Where can people buy your books?
Oh my God, all the things. So, LinkedIn is my social media platform of choice. Monique Russell, Clear Communication Coach. You can see me online at clearcommunicationsolutions.com. I have my books on Amazon, Intentional Motherhood, Who Said It Would Be Easy, and also The Ultimate Speaker's Guide. Don't forget to tune into the Bridge to You podcast, where Dr. Kerry was also a special featured guest.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And as far as what I'm doing, I am continuing to help individuals, teams, and organizations to improve their connection and their communication with training workshops, with one on one and group coaching. And we're moving also this year into the higher ed space with historically Black colleges and universities. So,
Ah, HBCU?
yeah, HBCU in the house. We're
I
getting
love
them
it.
career ready and we're putting in the framework so that the rate of internship completion is higher and placement into corporate organizations and even preparation for businesses as well.
So exciting. I can't wait to see what 2026 brings for you and your amazing family. All of the links to how people can connect with you will be in the show notes, so easily accessible for folks. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining me. Check Monique out. This week's practice is what I call voice mapping. So I encourage leaders to document one communication pattern where your voice may be consistently marginalized. And instead of asking, how do I speak up better, ask, how could I transform this framework entirely? And so observe one meeting or conversation where your ideas didn't gain traction. Map whose ideas do gain traction and what language receives validation. Identify one communication intervention you can implement that doesn't just help you be heard, but actually transform the environment. Please share your insights using hashtag revolutionary leadership to connect with our community. So, for organizations, examine how communication norms reward or silence leadership voices. What frameworks could you redesign to elevate, clarify equity, and trust? And for emerging professionals, begin practicing narrative ownership now. Don't wait to be misunderstood before learning how to frame your ideas with power. Connect with me on social media at Revolutionary Lead or visit revolutionarylead.com. I want to hear what communication patterns you're transforming and what's working for you. Let's build tomorrow's leadership blueprints together. And now for my favorite part of the show. This is where women share their experience with my teachings.
Hi, Corindy Williams, Executive Director of Repower, a national training and capacity building organization focused on centering BIPOC people, specifically women, trans, gender expansive people of color. I engaged KMB Consultancy at the beginning of my tenure as the first Black woman to lead this national organization's transformation from being a white-led, white-centered organization to who it needed to become, which is an organization that was majority BIPOC staff, led by a Black woman, transforming it to becoming an organization that's also centered BIPOC individual. To say the turnaround was challenging is an understatement. What I inherited was an organization that had gone through turmoil in its transition to who it needed to become. I inherited a multi-million-dollar deficit, as well as a staff that had been through the ringer. And you had low staff morale coupled with a financial challenge. I called on Kerry Mitchell Brown, who answered the call. Kerry helped us really set the tone as to who the organization needed to be. I needed to rebuild an organization that had a 20-year history, but felt like a startup. New staff, new leadership, old staff with baggage needed to become an organization that lived its values and its stated mission, which was to create a place of belonging, create a place where BIPOC individuals felt safe, where we could discuss and deal with race, and have a staff that was multiracial, follow a Black woman for the first time. We focused on first establishing cultural values. Who did we want to be, not just in the world, but who did we want to be with each other? Kerry helped me define my leadership and transformed who I became to lead the organization through this change in an environment, frankly, that was also challenging. At this time, we were entering a global pandemic. We were trying to hire new staff. We were trying to reset the tone of how we wanted to be with each other as well as for the movement. Kerry helped me define my leadership through who I hired as my leadership team. She helped me with coaching my leadership team to understand what it was like to have multi-identitied women of color lead a multiracial staff and women who has never followed the leadership of a Black woman. I had moments of doubt as to whether I was prepared and or ready to lead this organization through this transition, and Kerry helped me move through the process. What I would say to any organizational leader that is attempting to become a place where we can both be externally saying we stand for racial justice and that we believe in building a multiracial democracy, I would say engage Kerry. She used research to back what she was proposing. She gave me concrete steps in how I engage with my leadership team, what to expect from them, what they could expect from me. She helped me lead with transparency and clarity. And frankly, she challenged me to understand what was driving me from my own inner leadership. Who did I want to be? And how did I want to stand? And really asked me to confront what I felt were anti-Blackness towards me and my leadership, which was a very difficult condition to lead through when you also felt anti-Blackness towards you as you were trying to lead a staff and an organization to transform itself. Lots of the lessons I learned from Kerry helped to define our strategic plan. We were able to be more bold and unapologetic about who we wanted to be, both in redefining our mission, but also in our programmatic work. I trusted Kerry's leadership. I trusted she knew what she was doing. All of her work was led and backed by research. And she had a way of coaching me through difficult and challenging conversations, which were necessary through this process. Kerry helped me become the leader I am today. And I would trust her leadership and her skills and coaching techniques again. And I would engage her again in whatever challenge I was facing in the future. Thank you so much, Kerry. You will be in good hands if you engage KMB Consultancy.
Thank you for sharing your brilliance, your compassion, and your commitment to Black women, leading with power, ease, and strategy. Thank you for listening to Revolutionary Leadership. If today's conversation sparked something in you, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and share this episode with another change maker in your life. Until next time, keep leading with purpose, joy, and revolution.
Free.